we had dinner with some really good friends, and she turned to... Now you're getting my wife's perspective. We had dinner with some really good friends, and she turned to me and she said, hey, if you had to look back on your life, what would be some of the highlights? And I immediately thought to a bunch of different things, but one thing I thought of is 1 year after we got married, my wife had the idea, let's go live overseas with Campus Crusade for Christ, and we wound up in Lithuania for an entire year. It was a great time of ministry. We lectured in classrooms, lectured all over. We went to Moscow and did some evangelistic events. It was hard to live there in many different ways. Calling home was not easy. You had to book it through a Soviet operator, and sometimes she was just in a bad mood. You would call her and say, I'd like to call America, and she'd say, America, out of order. I'd say, the whole country? She'd go, whole country. I was like, all right, that happens, I guess. Wow. But if you were to ask me what was the hardest thing continually, it was the climate of Lithuania. Lithuania literally means land of many rains. So it rained a lot. I did not realize how much weather affected me until the sun would come out periodically, and I would feel like I was just renewed, energy-wise, spiritual perspective. So coming out of that year, I really made some interesting decisions of where I did not want to live. I have some friends who love Seattle. I have some friends who love Portland. Well, you know, I couldn't do it. I could not live in that kind of climate. Moving here, Noreen and I and the kids, we love this climate. We absolutely love it. There's a couple seasons I would change just a little bit, but I love the climate of California. Now, why am I talking about weather and climate and talking about relationships? Because communication theorists have long believed that as soon as two people start talking to each other, a communication climate forms that is just as real as anything outside the doors of this auditorium. And that communication climate either can make or break a relationship. It can make a family relationship be a positive one. It can make a roommate relationship be a positive or negative one. And when it comes to friendships, no doubt your friendships will be based on a relational climate that you really enjoy and you're encouraged by. Now, how do we apply this to dating? And while Danny said I have a book on marriage, really the book Marriage Forecasting could easily have been called Dating Forecasting, because the principles of a communication climate apply to virtually every human relationship we can think of. When I have the privilege to speak on apologetics or evangelism, I often will share the very same things I'm going to share with you this morning, but apply them to sharing our faith or defending whether God exists or not. So this morning, let's apply it to dating, and the key of everything I'm going to say is this: pick a climate that you want to live in for the rest of your life. Pick a climate that you like, and a climate that is not a ton of work to produce this climate. Yeah, marriage is work, dating is work, but it should not be that much work. So what's a communication climate? Very quickly, we say that a communication climate is the overarching sense of value and satisfaction individuals feel as they interact with each other and go about daily activities. So a communication climate, very simply put, is when I interact with you, do I feel valued? However, I define valued. All words are riddles that have to really be unpacked. So when I interact with you, do I feel valued? Second, the dailiness of dating. The dailiness of it. And you better believe when you get married, you really enter into the dailiness of it. One marriage counselor, in advising a person whether he should get married, said, do you want to eat breakfast with that person for the rest of your life? How we communicate with each other is going to form this communication climate. Now, communication theorists have been very interested. When we talk about communication climates, what specifically are we talking about? After much debate among scholars, generally speaking, a communication climate is made up of four things. One, what are our expectations we have, spoken and unspoken? Second, what's the amount of trust existing between two individuals? Third, how much do we acknowledge each other, and am I satisfied with how you acknowledge me? And then lastly, how committed are we to this relationship? And by the way, how do I define commitment? Okay, so very quickly, let's start to take a look at these. First, expectations. You've been thinking about dating for a long time. You've been thinking about a relationship for a long time. Guess what? When you start dating, you take all those expectations right into the dating relationship. Very specifically, you have spoken expectations. The spoken one would be, I expect you to pay for the date if you're a girl. That's my spoken expectation. But you also might carry it into unspoken expectations. Like I remember going on a date, and we pull up to the restaurant. I get out of the car, and I just start walking towards the restaurant. Okay? And I'm like, so guys, what do you do? I mean, my goodness, what do you do? So I turn around, walk back, open the door, and I say to her, it's safe. It's safe. Okay, so spoken expectations, this is what you say, and unspoken, by the way, both of them can absolutely alter your communication climate. If that person keeps tripping unspoken expectations, then the overarching sense of value you have will go down, and the daily activities you'll become annoyed. Why? Why should I have to tell you about what I think are these very practical, unspoken expectations? Now, you better believe when you get married, it all goes into marriage, because you've been thinking about marriage as well. So all of those expectations. I teach a class on gender. A lot of these expectations are based on our gender. So when we got married, Noreen, she just assumed I'd be the bug killer. She just assumed I'd be the person who carried heavy objects down from the attic. Here's my favorite. She assumed that I would fix the van. Why? Because I'm a man. By the way, I was also a theater major. I had mime classes. So maybe I could fix an imaginary van in a wind tunnel. I had mime classes. But Noreen's dad was MacGyver. Noreen's dad could make a bomb out of rope. I mean, he was... So Noreen looked at me, based on gender, said, honey, the van won't start. I looked at her and I said, bummer. But I went out there. You better believe I went out there because I'm a man. Popped the hood, just stood there. Just stood there. Now, $1,000,000 question. Where do your expectations come from? If expectations are so powerful to form a climate, where do they come from? Very short answers. One, it does come from your family of origin. Your parents gave you direct definitions, what it means to be a man, a woman, a husband, wife, a son, daughter. They gave you direct and indirect, much like spoken and unspoken. But then one huge place they came was culture. Culture, we could call it hegemony. It's like the air you don't even breathe. You walk into culture and it deeply impacts you. We could spend the rest of the morning talking about how it's impacted your view of God, your view of marriage, your view of sexual intimacy, your view of virginity. For sure it has impacted your view of romance, okay? So I was watching last night the Grammys, and let's play just a little bit of a song from Bruno Mars. Man, you know what happens, right? This is what happens. Ladies will hear that song, and in the sort of the back of their mind, they have a filter that says, oh, come on, come on. I mean... Okay, but then in a dating relationship, guys, what happens? We walk up to our girlfriend, we say, and she says, how do I look today? And we say, good. In the back of your mind, ladies, you're thinking, good. Are the stars still shining right now? Is there anything you would change about me? I don't know, maybe I would like, no! Right? We may laugh about that, but Heriot-Watt University did a study. Danny made me laugh about your Jennifer Aniston study, but did a study of 150 American romance movies and how did they affect Americans. And their conclusion was it spoils your view of love. It spoils it. It expects you to bond very quickly on virtually every level, and that you have a soulmate that you do not need to tell that soulmate what your needs are. Think of all the unspoken expectations, and that movies, romantic movies, while they're funny, also create in us really unrealistic expectations. So when you're dating, you need to evaluate constantly, how are my expectations being met or unmet? So very quickly, evaluating expectations. Do I feel free to voice expectations to the person I'm dating? Yes or no? And how do they react when you actually do it? Second, what unspoken expectations do I have that are being unmet? Some of us have unspoken dating expectations that we feel like it's ridiculous that I should have to mention this expectation. That person should know. Noreen might say to me, why do I have to tell you to open my door? You ought to know that's what a gentleman does. That's a pretty powerful unspoken expectation. Okay, next on our list. Oh, another one. How much are my expectations being influenced by culture today? How much are we buying into the cultural message when it comes to sex, romance, love, marriage? Very powerful that we deprogram ourselves in some very powerful ways, especially the funny ones, the funny movies. In my persuasion class, I learned that the first level of acceptance is laughter. In persuasion, the first level of acceptance is laughter. Maybe we need to be a little bit careful about what we're programming ourselves to think about love, dating, things like that. Okay, let's move on. Second part of a communication climate is acknowledgement. Acknowledging a person is perhaps the most confirming form of communication and the most rare. What do we mean when we acknowledge a person? From the Harvard Negotiation Project, it says an acknowledgement is simply this: any indication that you're struggling to understand the emotional content of what the other person is saying. So, do you know that psychologists will say this is the most important part of any communication climate, any relationship? Do you, in the relationship, feel acknowledged by that person? Not just physically, but spiritually, intellectually, and emotionally. William James once said if he could think of a punishment for a person, I would set him loose in society and have nobody recognize or acknowledge that person. So how do you actually acknowledge a person? From the Harvard Negotiation Project, very quickly, 3 things. 1, let the other person know that what they have said has made an impression on you. You don't need to agree with it, but you need to know that at least what I say has made an impression on you in some way. Do you get neutrality from that person? You speak your mind, and you do it passionately, and that person's response is, oh, okay. And you're like, wow, really? Yeah, okay. I just shared with you one of my deepest convictions and did it kind of passionately, and your response was, well, okay, I disagree. Well, could you at least acknowledge how much this means to me? Very important. Number 2, acknowledgement means that you're working to understand their feelings. There's times Noreen and I disagree, not because I don't understand what she is saying, it's because I don't think it ought to be that big a deal. But it is a big deal to my wife. So am I working to at least understand why this is such a big deal? To understand why it's important to Noreen does not condone it. It doesn't mean that I agree with it. It simply means that I'm working to try to understand where she's coming from. Third, let the other person know that their feelings do matter to you. Even as we disagree with each other, it pains me that my perspective hurts you. So acknowledgement is incredibly important. My master's thesis was bringing together gays and Christians involved in a culture war that deeply disagreed with each other. And they simply came together, and I spent 4 weeks to have them simply acknowledge each other's stories. And then the 5th week came, they actually talked about their differences. Guess what? The whole study was based on, did those 4 weeks make a difference? And they did make a difference. You care about me. You learned my history. You understood how I got to my convictions. Even though we disagree with each other, I so appreciate all the work you did to understand and acknowledge my perspective. So very quickly, what are some great questions to ask? First, evaluating acknowledgement. In what topic or issue does my significant other acknowledge my view, but doesn't necessarily welcome it or seek it out? So when you bring it up, I'll acknowledge it, but I'm not seeking out your perspective. I will acknowledge it when you give it, but I don't ask you very often what you think about things. Now, do you like that? Is that the kind of climate you want to live in for long periods of time? Another question to ask. Overall, I feel my significant other acknowledges my perspective in ways I value. Now, this gets very practical, right? Noreen could be talking to me, and I could be reading the newspaper, the sports page. And Noreen would say, honey, you're not listening to what I'm saying. No, honey, I heard everything you just said. Boom, 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 boom. And Noreen would say, yeah, but when you're reading the newspaper, that does not communicate to me that you're acknowledging my perspective. Oh, okay, because listening is not just content. It's the relational side of things. So when you're in this dating relationship, do you feel acknowledged? And carry it one step further, is that person asking for your opinion on different issues? And when you give it, how does he or she react to your opinion? Another question. Are my views generally met with empathy rather than detached neutrality? Okay, 2 more to go. Communication climate, trust. Communication theorists believe this is the most important. Communication theorists believe if trust is lacking in the relationship, it will sabotage the entire relationship. Mahatma Gandhi said this: the moment there is suspicion about a person's motives, everything he does becomes tainted. So let's say Noreen didn't trust me. And let's say today I gave her flowers and chocolate and even gave her a gift. And in her mind she's thinking, well, come on. At the end of the day, he wants to be intimate because it's Valentine's Day. That's it. That's all this represents, is at the end of the day, on Valentine's Day, which, by the way, could be a huge expectation, right? And then Noreen says, so that's why you did this. You're just buttering me up because there's something you want from me. That will literally neutralize every good thing I could possibly do. So trust is a huge part when it comes to a communication climate. Now, trust is always in 2 parts. 1, self-trust. Am I a person worthy of trust? All of us want to be trusted in relationships, but we have to ask the really hard question, like King David asked when he said, God, search my heart, is, am I a trustworthy person? See, some of you, I'd make the argument, you're not ready to be in a dating relationship because you're not healthy enough to do it. No, first thing you do, generally speaking, in marriage is you get healthy, then you get married. So in dating relationships, some of us are not trustworthy people. There are major issues happening within us where we don't trust ourselves, and our track record isn't that great when it comes to certain habitual sins. So the first thing we do is we sit down and we say, I want this person to trust me, but am I really a trustworthy person? It's self-examination. Second, it is what we call relational trust. We do count on people to be people of their word, that you have my back, that you're not talking about me to other people, that you believe the best of me, and I actually trust you, that you're that kind of person, is that you're going to hold what I say in confidence. Look what Proverbs 25:19 says. Like a bad tooth or a lame foot is reliance on the unfaithful in times of trouble. Trust really does come down to credibility. The word credibility comes from a Latin root, which means to believe. So you have credibility? I believe what you say. Now, I had a friend of mine lied to me, got caught in a lie. Okay? And you know, we were actually at this party. My kids had a party, and so I told this individual to blow up a balloon. I said, now hold it, don't tie it. I said, you know what that balloon represents? My trust. And over our relationship, our history, you had blown up that balloon. That lie was devastating. I said, now let go of the balloon. I said, you know what happened? The trust went out. Now, good thing about trust, it can be rebuilt, right? Breath by breath, action by action. Now, this is true in a dating relationship. This is true in marriage. That's the devastation of pornography. It's the devastation of an affair, emotional or physical. The trust has been severely damaged within a marriage or a relationship. So you need to ask the question, 1, do I trust myself? Am I trustworthy? Second, do I trust this person? How hard is it for me to trust this person? Here are some questions to ask evaluation-wise. What does my significant other do that makes it easy for me to trust him or her? Second, are there topics about which I suspect my significant other is being less than truthful? Issues of finances, pornography, how they spend their time, and you ask these questions and you get evasiveness. Is that the kind of climate you want to stay in? Is that the kind of climate that can be improved? Or do you feel like you're running into these habitual issues over and over and over again? We do fine in our dating relationship until this topic comes up, and then I really feel a chill come through the relationship. Okay, last one is what we call commitment to each other. Are we committed to each other? Commitment is incredibly important. And commitment, the hallmark of commitment, is the assumption of a future together. So you do have this defining the relationship talk, and you say, hey, we're exclusive, and we're going to move forward, but how committed are you to the relationship? Now, this is where gender gets really interesting, because you have to define that word committed. How do I know you're committed to this dating relationship? And we call that investments, the amount of time and energy you're willing to put into that relationship. But then, how do you define an investment? So you really have to work that out. I know you're committed because you spend every waking hour with me. I know you're committed because you don't spend time with your friends and choose me over your friends every single time. I know you're committed because every time we go to eat, you sit with me and not your friends. I know you're committed to me because, and you really have to define what is commitment. Now let me tell you a gender observation, generally speaking. Ladies, generally speaking, women do what Deborah Tannen calls rapport talk, is you share things about yourself with that person, and to the degree that that person receives it, you'll look at that as an investment into the relationship. Generally speaking, women are face-to-face with each other. Okay? Men, it's not that we devalue face-to-face communication, but men view investments as side-by-side. You go and do things with each other. All right, makes sense? So, my good friend John at this university, we go play tennis, and during those times of tennis, we have great conversations, but we're going to play tennis. John and I also ride bikes together, mountain bikes. It's not that we ever really sit down at Starbucks and sit down and say, okay, John, share something intimate. Go. But you know what? We don't always have to play tennis. Just the other day, I called him on the phone, wanted his advice. We talked for 45 minutes. So commitment is netted out by way of investments, but what investments matter to you? You better be on the same page with that. So here are some quick questions to evaluate commitment. First, ask the question, when we face struggles in our relationship, I'm worried that our relationship could be unstable. If you're worrying about the relationship all the time, that's a sign that the relationship may not be as stable as you want it to be. And guess what? You've just seen your future. Okay? Another one, in terms of investments, energy, thoughts, times, we generally put the same amount into the relationship. Or do you feel like this is not equal? I'm putting more time in than my boyfriend or girlfriend, or I feel like I'm always doing this, and that they're responding or not putting any forethought to the relationship. Last, am I too committed to this relationship? Guys, I got to tell you, because I teach classes on relationship, I have people come see me all the time, and these couples will come, and they'll sit down, and they'll say things like, oh, we fight a lot, but we're working it out, God's been really good, we're trying to love each other unconditionally, and I go, whoa, wait a minute, you sound like an old 35-year-old couple. Guys, you're dating. The climate ought to be pretty good most of the time. Now, are there seasons where it's going to be tough? Yeah, but you're dating. You're getting the best that person has right now. The best. And you're saying the climate is sort of kind of And then I have real issue with this thing. We're loving each other unconditionally. Who told you you're supposed to be doing that in the dating relationship? No. You're dating conditionally. You're looking at this climate going, I don't like living in this climate. It's not strong enough. I don't like the rain every day. Well, you know what? Look at the climate and say, I wonder if there isn't a better climate. Or we try to fix the climate, it always goes back to Lithuania. It always goes back to rain. It always goes back, right? You want to live in a climate that, generally speaking, I like this climate. We love California. Now, does it have wildfires every once in a while and mudslides? Yes. But generally speaking, this is a good climate. So, guys, I don't even think dating is the most important thing for you to be here. I really don't. My students are laughing right now because they hear this from me all the time. I think the most important thing for you to do right here is to get a good education, cultivate your relationship with God, and leave here with same-sex friends that will follow you the rest of your life. I have 2 friends I still talk to from my undergrad days at Eastern Michigan University. But let's not discount the fact that this is a powerful laboratory. This is a great place for you to find out, hey, what kind of a climate do I like, and what kind of people generally foster that kind of climate. Now, the book out there is about marriage, but I promise you, you could take every principle of that book and apply it to your parents. Every single principle, and you could apply it to your roommates. You know, with your roommate, you sit down and you're talking out and it doesn't go well, and you go, what happened? Well, you cannot ignore a communication climate. You can't ignore it. Now, no climate's going to be perfect, but you have to work with it. So here's my prayer. Now, I bet you this just started a whole bunch of questions that you want to ask. Well, Tuesday night, me and Noreen with 2 great couples. At 8 o'clock in Calvary Chapel, we're going to talk about a theology of marriage, what's dating for, when is dating good, when is it bad, and it's going to be great with the Tonuses and the Graces. My goodness, you can pick 2 other great couples just to sit, and we're going to make a Q&A and have a great interaction time. Take advantage of this week. Even if you're not dating, put tools in the toolbox. Let me pray for you. Father, I pray for these students. Lord, what a great week. Thank you for everybody who's put work into this week. Father, not everybody's in a dating relationship, and you have not called everybody into a dating relationship. It's seasons of life. But let us do the preparation that when we enter into a particular season, maybe dating, maybe engagement or marriage, that we will have already thought about this. Lord, lay on our hearts the types of people you want us to date, to even marry, based on the calling that you've given each one of us. So, Father, I pray for all speakers and everybody participating in this week that it'd be a great conversation starter that would last not the rest of the semester, but really the rest of our lives. We commit this to you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.